Hello and welcome to Extreme Gameplays and today's big project time! Welcome to Extreme Gameplays, where I play games tirelessly. Today I'm back with another video diving deep into the mechanics and depth of a certain weapon known amongst all Olympian gods and titans. The weapon that ended the Great War and defeated the titans. The weapon with Kratos' godly powers stored into it. The weapon that led to the demise of everyone who stood in Kratos' way in God of War 3. And the weapon that brought hope to a dying pantheon. The Blade of Olympus.
I banish you to the darkest pits of Tartarus!
So this is gonna be just like the Blades of Chaos comparison video and the Magic Attacks comparison video. We'll go over the Blade of Olympus and see which game, God of War 2, God of War 3, God of War Ghost of Sparta, and God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, has the best Blade of Olympus. God of War Ascension is excluded since it's only in multiplayer. Now, like the other comparison videos, this will be separated into categories, and these are the categories that I'm going to be covering today. Design, which one looks the best, sound effects, which one sounds the best, moveset, the weapon's moveset and what it does, crowd control, which one is best at controlling crowds, and finally damage output, which one deals the most damage. After being done with a set category, I'll also have a top 4 at the very end of each category, and at the end of the video I'm going to have a full-on definitive top 4 Blade of Olympus list based on my opinion. Now, with all that said, grab your popcorn, sit back, relax, get your holes in check, and enjoy the comparison. Let us begin. Okay, so starting the comparison, I'm gonna start with the simple categories first. First, let's start with the design. The Blade of Olympus got revealed in God of War 2 for the first time. The first cutscene we ever saw of the Blade was a cutscene that was rendered in engine, so we don't quite get to see how beautiful this fridge door is, until later in the Kratos death scene, and later even more clear in the Atlas scene where we get a CGI cutscene and the Blade looks like a wet dream. The design of the Blade is so good. Later on we see it again in another CG cutscene when he stabs Athena, and oh my god! Look at that! Now, the thing I love about God of War 2's Blade the most, it's a thing totally unique to God of War 2's Blade of Olympus, and is that it has zappy zaps. Electricity all over the blade, which is something that we never saw in later God of Wars for whatever reason. All you see is blue glow, which is still beautiful, but where's my electricity? I have a thing for electricity and lightning in general. Any weapon that has lightning is automatically winning my heart. The Blade of Olympus having electricity is the best thing in the world, and only God of War 2's Blade has that. God of War 3's Blade does summon lightning from God knows where when he finishes an enemy with L2 and R2, but that's about it. It doesn't have constant lightning going on with it like God of War 2's cutscenes. Now we get to God of War 2's in-game Blade of Olympus, which it does still look very beautiful, but you know, owing to the technology back then at the time, they couldn't really have all the details like you have in other entries like God of War 3 or God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. So to make everything fair, God of War 2's Blade of Olympus design will be counted as the cutscenes one. The CG cutscenes Blade of Olympus is what we'll go with, because it's not gonna be fair to compare the in-game of God of War 2 to the in-game of God of War 3, or hell, God of War Valhalla. Like, it's just not gonna be fair, so I'm gonna be counting the CG cutscenes Blade of Olympus and God of War 2. We spoke a little about God of War 3, and let's get to it now. The Blade of Olympus in here is beautiful. It's a killing machine is what you think the moment you see its beautiful design in-game. The Blade of Olympus gets used the most in God of War 3. The game has the graphics of a white, bald, American beer-drinking son of a bitch, so the details of the blade are sharp and beautiful even in-game. It's the same design as God of War 2's Blade of Olympus, of course, but notice the lack of the zaps? I hate that. It still looks beautiful with that glow, and it still looks like the best thing in the world when it calls for lightning from God knows where before stabbing and killing its enemy. The Blade of Olympus in here is badass when it comes to design, and we get to see it without a blue glow for the first time ever in here. It's just the blade with nothing on it. The moment my literal father touches the blade, it starts shining, signifying that it's still powered with Kratos' godly powers from God of War 2. Very cool God of War 3 details. Seeing the blade with no glow is really something. The design obviously remained the same, like the CG cutscenes from God of War 2, it's just that they removed the electricity. It's just a very cool thing that you see the details even when in game. Yeah, let's move on now. Let's not start rambling. God of War Ghost of Sparta. This one is only seen in-game, in the combat arena when using the Gravedigger after his high school glow-up. The design is better than God of War 2's in-game design. That's all that I'm willing to give it, since you don't see it in cutscenes in God of War Ghost of Sparta. God of War 2 has it at its best in its cutscenes, so yeah. God of War Valhalla, the latest installment of the Blade of Olympus. This took everyone by surprise and by a storm. Now this is obviously and objectively the most detailed we've seen the Blade. Every little detail is there. It looks the sharpest out of them all and has the most details on it. It is a given, with the camera being so close, the weapons are detailed to all ends. Really cool design, but it has one problem. The same as God of War 3's problem. No electricity like in God of War 2. Why? But anyways, not a lot that I can say about the Blade of Olympus and freaking God of War Ragnarok, a PS4 and PS5 game. Obviously, it's gonna have the most details, especially with the camera being so close. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. Now we've come to the end of the design comparison. Time for a quick top 4 Blade of Olympus list, design-wise. Coming in at number 4, we have God of War Ghost of Sparta for some obvious reasons. The blade does look really good in action and I like it. It has electricity attacks, but no electricity around it like at all times. But yeah, it takes the number 4 spot. At number 3, we got God of War 3. Better details when in-game, but it's at the number 3 spot because, come on, Ragnarok got it with even sharper and more clear details. It's obviously gonna have to be the winner here. Although you could have an argument that the glow in God of War 3's Blade of Olympus is better looking than the glow in God of War Ragnarok Valhalla's. Overall, I just love how detailed it is in God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, which you know what that means. At number 2, we got God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. The blade in this game is just at its most detailed look, but it is, however, put at number 2 spot because at number 1 we got God of War 2, where it all began. In the CG cutscenes, we see every little detail of the blade and electricity with a beautiful blue glow. None of the other games did this. God of War 3 does strike lightning when finishing bosses with the blade, but that's about it. God of War 2 takes the number 1 spot just because of the electricity, and you know, the CG cutscenes has all the details on the world, so there's nothing lacking here. That's the top 4 list for the design category. We now move on to the next category. Sound effects. God of War 2's Blade of Olympus sounds real heavy and nice. It sounds like you're waving around something that truly has a lot of power and history behind it. Some odd sounds that you don't even know how they were even made. Like this retro farming move. What even is this sound? You almost feel the weight behind every hit too, like this weapon is just a weapon of destruction. And the lasers just sound like lasers coming out of a blade that ended a great war. I don't really know how to describe it. God of War 2 sound effects for the Blade of Olympus is just very, very good. Now, next up we got God of War 3, and man, if you thought God of War 2 sound effects were good, you should watch Shrek 2. Because it's a really nice movie. Now, for real, if you thought God of War 2's blade sound effects sounded good, wait until you get to God of War 3. This is the best one. I'm just gonna spoil the top 4. The moment you activate it and start swinging, you'll know what true power is. This might sound like me shilling over God of War 3, but hear me out. The sound, even when standing in place, is just otherworldly. Just sounds like something that is about to erupt, some deep power that is waiting to be unleashed, some deep, forbidden power. Other than the awesome swing sound effects, which are awesome, this blade, and when it hits the ground, is something else too. Yeah, that's the power of the Great War slamming the ground right there. God of War 3 also shines in these moments when finishing a foe. The blade absorbs lightning from the sky and the sound, man, the sound! God of War 3 truly has the best sound effects for the blade. Like when you're running, you can hear it very clearly, and it's very nice when you're swinging, when you're slamming the thing down. It's just the best. We move on to God of War Ghost of Sparta's blade that doesn't have a lot of sound effects. Mostly the swinging sound effect, which sounds mighty and powerful, but again, that's just from God of War 2's swinging sound. There are some other sound effects, but nothing to truly mention here at a high ranking list. Next and last, we got God of War Valhalla. The blade in here sounds the weakest out of the 4 games. Don't get me wrong, it still makes sounds that are really awesome, especially for the Divine Retribution laser. It still sounds very, very hard. It's just that it doesn't feel otherworldly, like the supernatural factor is just no longer there. It doesn't hold the same weight when it comes to sound effects. Like it just sounds like a normal giant sword slamming the ground rather than just literally a blade that ended a great war. And now to rank them in a top 4 sound effects list. Coming in at number 4, we have God of War Ghost of Sparta. This one has the least sound effects, and it doesn't really hold up that well against what's coming after. Because at number 3, we got God of War Valhalla. Nice sound effects, it's just that it doesn't really sound otherworldly like the others, mostly sounding like a normal giant sword, as I said. We move on to number 2. At number 2, we got God of War 2. The sound in this one is total insanity. It makes so many different sounds with each attack, making every hit have some real nice impact with its sounds. Very, very good. But not as good as the number 1 spot. We have the smoking God of War 3. The sound design in this one is peak. Absorbing electricity, normal attack swings, oh my god. Blade hitting the ground. Even when you magic attack, it makes the same amazing sound. And even when standing still or, running. This thing just sounds like the Blade of Olympus. Total aggressiveness and brutality in just the sound that comes out of this thing. Takes the number 1 spot for the sound effects category. Let's move on. And now, we enter the territory of what really matters in here. The prior 2 categories were mostly for looks and beauty. What comes now is the true comparison. Before we dive into it though, please make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying the video. I make a lot of God of War videos in a lot of weird ways that I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks, and let's continue. And now, I hope you are prepared for the serious categories. We're gonna be starting the first category in the serious segment of the video, the movesets. God of War 2's Blade of Olympus has a lot of moves that are shit. Let's go over the moveset that we have here. Starting with the normal strings, this has a good light string. It starts quick and covers some nice area. It's not the best thing in the world, but it's not also the worst thing in the world, but it's in the middle ground. Then I just want to jump ahead and talk about the shittiest launcher in the whole world. This is very slow and uncancelable once it starts. Only way to stop it is by cycle canceling, which can be used to cancel the recovery of your secondaries instantly. Now, what is cycle canceling? God of War 2's secondary weapon animations can be cancelled if you enter the pause menu and cycle between the weapons. To put it shortly and not overcomplicate, watch what I do in this clip and I'm sure you'll understand. What's happening is I do the Divine Retribution laser special attack, I press start, I cycle between the weapons, I exit the pause menu, Kratos is back to his normal stance now. That's why I'm recovered from the recovery animation, and I can instantly jump and grab him. Any moment you feel like Kratos is in recovery mode and an enemy might, hit you, do this and Kratos is returned to his basic stance. It's called cycle cancel. Speedrunners use it too. It instantly cancels whatever Kratos is doing with his secondary. Anyways, back to the strings. It has a very bad launcher. Only do it when you're certain you and the one enemy are alone and safe. As for the heavy combo, it's good, but not good on its own. You need to pair it with the first hit of the light string to make it really good. I want to preface, really good! This weapon has the fastest string in the entire game that deals the most damage. It is a really nice loop that can destroy anything in its path, especially when you max out the weapon. It goes like this: square, triangle, triangle, cancel with the bow, repeat. Once you get the hang of it, this weapon shines. When maxed out, this combo truly shreds through the souls of these fools. Total calamity if just used right. Other than that, we have air attacks, which can be good if the blade is maxed out, since, lasers start shooting when you max out this bad boy. Speaking of lasers, let's talk about the special attacks. They suck. All the special attacks suck other than one, which is the best move of the Blade of Olympus. So the light special is a disgrace that should never be used. It takes too long and it is way too unsafe, and it doesn't even cover a huge area and you can't really redirect Kratos while it's going on. It also doesn't do anything that insane when it comes to damage wise. Then comes the heavy special, which is the best move in this weapon. Divine Retribution laser is a killer move. This thing has range, it has damage, it causes piercing, it causes knockback, and it has a pretty nice trick to it that I'll demonstrate right now. So the laser alone is a human fucker. It's a really nice ranged attack that deals some really nice damage, and it's unaffected with difficulty. So the laser alone deals really nice damage. There's a catch to it. If you do this move and land it up close, where the blade hits the enemy's hitbox, the whole attack deals more damage. Since, the blade is hitting the enemy and the laser is hitting the enemy. This thing is as lovely as an attack can get. I mean, for fuck's sake, look at how good I am when using it carefully. Just be careful of the recovery. If you want to cancel the recovery or the attack as a whole, just cycle cancel, bro. It's easy. This is the best attack in here. It can even be done awesomely in the air if you just press L1 in the air. And it is unaffected with difficulty. Again, regardless of the difficulty you're playing, this thing keeps the damage. Doesn't matter if you're on easy or very hard. This thing keeps the insane damage. It doesn't get affected. And now we move on. Let's see. Oh, did I mention that this weapon has a red orbs farming move in New Game Plus, where you're already overdosing on red orbs? Anyways, we're still not done with the Blade of Olympus moveset in God of War 2. This thing has a very special buff going on for it when maxed out. It starts shooting lasers out of nearly every normal attack that you do. This is a really awesome upgrade to the Blade of Olympus. It is very, very unique, but there is something that we need to touch on. These lasers are not as powerful as the special attack laser, the Divine Retribution laser. But still, they are very good and objectively increase the output of the damage on the foes. More on that later in the damage category, but this thing is just insane. Lasers start shooting out. Very, very good. And that is it when it comes to God of War 2 Blade of Olympus moveset. Not the best moveset, but it is good. Next up, God of War 3. The Blade of Olympus in this game has aggressive attacks to all ends. We start with the light string. It is very fast and good. It is so great for mobility as well. Look at how much screen area Kratos is covering. Like, look at where I'm going to start and where I'm going to end up after this whole combo finishes. Kratos just dashes from one end of the screen to another. Like, you can even do some pretty creative positioning with this. We move on next to the heavy string. The heavy string is a nice spin that hits the enemy twice and finishes with a slam. Connecting the light string with this heavy string is good. The two moves complement each other greatly. It is the best loop, and you can dodge cancel at any moment you're feeling unsafe. I don't really recommend finishing the triangle combo unless you're absolutely certain that you're safe against one enemy or even a crowd. If you know you're safe to drop the slam, go ahead with it. As for the light string, it causes a hyper knockback with its ender, knocking back the enemy, but it requires a lot of build-up. It takes time, not really worth going with unless timed right, I guess. Now the last string we have is the jump attack. This one sees Kratos stabbing the ground, scattering enemies away, something that I'll touch on in the next category of crowd control, but for now, let's just keep it at the moveset. Anyways, he then follows it up with a shockwave that causes a really nice knockback again. It is essentially the enemy getting knocked back far this time, unlike the first stab where it sends the enemy scattering away from you. You can really set up some nice ring outs with this. This can be really good on crowd since it also deals collision damage, for how low that collision damage is, but still, it's good. See that? Now the collisions might not scale in God of War 3, but simply put, when there's a lot of enemies flying towards each other, ain't no such thing as, oh, the collisions are weak. But in my opinion, this one is honestly just really good to cancel out of on the first attack. It sends full scattering away from you, and it can lead to some really good ring outs. There's also the air activation, which is very good. Kratos drops with a slam that sends the enemies flying, allowing for room to catch your breath. Very good. The Blade of Olympus in God of War 3 has a nice moveset, but the blade on its own is not what makes the form great. It's a combination of the rage mechanic and the blade itself that makes the two shine together as one. Talking about the rage factor alone would do it a huge disservice, and same with talking about the blade alone. I'm gonna have to kind of balance it together and be objective about all this. The blade complements the rage mode and vice versa, but this is not a rage mode video. This is a blade comparison video. All I can say is that it has great moveset. Now we move on to God of War Ghost of Sparta. God of War Ghost of Sparta's blade is very limited. It is the same light string from God of War 2, same air attacks and such. But the R1 attack is what redeems this weapon pretty good. An electricity attack that attaches itself to the enemy and chains other enemies with it. I will dive deeper into it in the next category of crowd control. But that really is it for the blade in this game. Very limited moveset, but it does complement itself. Going with the laser and attacking with light attacks while things are happening is a good thing. Just look at what I'm doing to this Cyclops. The moves complement each other greatly, that's all that I can say, and it has some nice hit properties. Here's the thing with God of War Ghost of Sparta and God of War 3's Blade of Olympus. They have real awesome hit properties, especially God of War 3, owing for it being a rage mode, but we'll get to that in the next category, I swear. God of War Ragnarok Valhalla's Blade of Olympus is truly where it's at. Oh my god, where do I begin with this one? The light string is mostly the same as the other games, other than the ender where he finishes it with God of War 3's shockwave attack. It is a very nice string that works pretty well with the game's mechanics, dodging while attacking and all the good jazz in God of War Ragnarok. Then we have the heavy combo, which is a mix of one God of War 2 attack and the rest being God of War 3's heavy string. Now we also got the lovely Divine Retribution laser, but it's not as powerful as God of War 2's soul-piercing crowd-fucking bullet. Now other than what I just explained, the blade in this game has a move that is extremely unique and is one that complements other moves too. It is literally the best move in the Blade of Olympus here. The triangle attack. Now this is one of the best attacks in the whole game. It is a really nice distance closer that can even work from a very far away place. Pop this bad boy after doing something from range and you'll know what I mean. Now this attack is from God of War 3's Light Ender where Kratos dashes towards the enemy with great might. Except in here is a standalone attack that can close distances from a far place. I love this attack so much. Like this thing helps with the whole game as a whole. Maybe you did a runic from a far range and you want to close the distance? Do the runic and switch to the blade and do the triangle attack. Baller mechanic to just close the distance and instantly come back to action. Like this just added so much mobility to God of War Ragnarok. It's insane. I want to move on to my next point about the Blade of Olympus in this game, and is that it has the most synergy in its attacks. Now what do I mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
Basically, the moves work really well and complement each other. You just shot a divine retribution laser, right? Follow it up with a triangle attack to close the distance and keep attacking from there. See, that's 3 whole segments of attacks complementing each other. Or let's say you're casually attacking with the blade, you can so smoothly switch to the heavy string in between. The moves complement each other in a really nice way, but that's not simply it for the attacks. My god, I love the blade in this game. Those were the attacks that I just explained. Now peep this. You can hold your inputs to output more damage. What the hell is this weapon? This is a very nice and creative addition to the blade that ended the Great War. So basically, you can hold the attack button for every attack that you do. This right here, man, this right here makes the blade have so much more depth and timing to it. It's actually insane, but it's also still not over. It's not over! It's over! The Blade of Olympus is a very elegant and careful rage mode in this game, and it has baller mechanics that serve that well. For starters, you have a parry mechanic. One hell of a parry mechanic. You press L1 before an attack hits you and you parry it, allowing you to stay in the mode for longer and not taking damage in the process. But that's not it. This allows you to follow up with an attack of yours. R1 that does the attack before the finisher of the light string, and it can be followed up with another R1 that does the finisher of the light combo. Or R2 for the heavy finisher that is this beautiful slam. The parry is a really nice special mechanic to the blade. You can even parry red unblockable attacks. The Blade of Olympus really shines in this game in a lot of aspects. It's not just the moveset, I swear, we'll get to it in other categories. It has a lot of things that separates it from other God of War games. Very, very good Blade of Olympus. It is also a really nice rage mode, keeping the cancel aspect that God of War 3 brought, rage maintaining, and many more things that I can go all day about, but that's a video for another day, as I said. For now, we're only talking Blade of Olympus. That's where we reach the end of the moveset category, and now, let's have a quick top 4 moveset list real quick. Coming in at number 4, we have God of War Ghost of Sparta. Again, very limited moveset, not much I can really say about it. Others are just a little better than this one. Next up at number 3, we have God of War 3. I love the moveset in God of War 3's blade so much, mostly because they all have a lot of hit properties that work great for the game they're in. But I can't help its case when there are 2 other games that simply have a more broken moveset. I'll talk more in depth about what I love about the hit properties of God of War 3's blade in the next category of crowd control. But for now, this takes the number 3 spot. At number 2, we have God of War 2. You might not use every move in the book, but the couple of moves that you will be using are just way too good. Divine Retribution Laser Special Attack is simply too good to go up against. It deals great damage, it has awesome range, has a nice hit property where it causes a knockback half collision, has a deep hit mechanic where hitting it from up close deals more damage, is unaffected by difficulty, and you can do it both on the ground and in the air. The normal attacks and the broken buff they receive when the weapon is maxed out is simply better than sex. You just need to face it. Both air and ground attacks shooting lasers is a really nice thing. Speaking of ground attacks, this fucking thing is carnage. This should have been the sequel to Avengers Infinity War or some shit. This is just way too good. Hell, finishing the heavy string is also good with that slam. It covers a nice area. God of War 2 has the superior moveset. While God of War 3 is good, God of War 2 is more effective and stays for longer. You know, since it's not a rage mode, but yeah. I do have an argument about the God of War 2 blade over God of War 3 blade, and I'm gonna touch on it later on at the very end of the video. Just an afterthought while editing, and it's kind of regarding the fact that God of War 2's blade is only accessible in New Game Plus, so in a casual no upgrade run or a vanilla run, you're using the Blade of Olympus in God of War 3 a lot more than God of War 2, which would make me choose God of War 3 over God of War 2 if we're talking as a whole or in this category right now, but this is just an afterthought. I'm isolating. I'm kind of blacking out all these aspects that go into the blade. As you may have noticed in the video, I'm not putting into consideration the rage mode that is in God of War 3 or anything. I'm kind of just taking the blades out of context, counting them alone. Yeah, I'm gonna touch on it deeper in the end of the video. Just keep watching. God of War 2 takes the number 2 spot. Next up at number 1, we have the best moveset. God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. I just spoke a lot about why this is so great, no need to repeat myself. It's pretty clear why this is at number 1. A lot of moves, they all work together. Parrying, you know, guard breaking. Did I mention this has a drop attack? I just talked about it a couple of minutes ago. I don't need to repeat myself. Let's move on. Now that was the top 4 list based on movesets. We now move on to the next category, crowd control. Now crowd controlling is something very important in God of War. This franchise is known to throw a lot of enemies for you in a given encounter, so you're gonna have to bring your A game for the crowd controlling game, and in this game that you're gaming on, A game or some cool line. So we start with God of War 2. The blade in this game is kinda good for crowd controlling. Let me explain. At level 1, you're better off camping and using the best move of the weapon, Divine Retribution lasers. This move causes some sweet damage and penetrates through enemies. It also causes a sweet knockback for half collisions. Best move in this blade. Just gotta be careful of the recovery, but cycle cancelling has you covered. The moveset of the blade in here is just not the best for crowd controlling. Now, of course, if you're good enough, you could also go all melee on these fools too, but it is a bit more risky and requires hella skill. But if I'm being completely honest, not a really good thing for crowd controlling, unless you get it maxed out where it wrecks literally everything on its way, but we'll get to that later on in the damage category, since I think it has a lot to do with the destruction damage that it deals rather than its moveset being anything good for crowd controlling. But to give it some crowd control credit, the Titan Smoker starts shooting lasers from basic attacks. How insane is that? Using the best string of square, triangle, triangle and repeating it means carnage. Again, mostly because of the damage, but we'll get to it in the next category. That is it for God of War 2. We now move on to the smoking Mike Tyson, God of War 3, Blade of Olympus. The Blade of Olympus in this game is the rage mode. I felt like starting this sentence like this. It being a super state, rage mode gives the blade an advantage over the God of War 2 blade in the crowd controlling department. In God of War 2, this was purely a secondary weapon. Here it's a rage mode. This thing is very good for crowd controlling in God of War 3, if used correctly. If the right hit properties are used, this is extremely good against small enemies and even grunts. It just has a lot of attacks that can all be useful. They all have real nice hit properties that send the enemies scattered away from Kratos, oof, or flying away from Kratos, or even launched up neatly for you to grab. With proper setup, you ring out a whole crowd, or make the crowd behave and give some room for breathing when activating the rage in the air. The greatness of the Blade of Olympus in this entry is purely the hit properties. This thing is also a killer attack canceller for the enemies. It is extremely good on crowds of enemies. It being a rage mode gives it these kinds of powers. Now, I hope I got my point across clearly now. It cancels a lot of enemy attacks just by attacking them. This is more so owing to it being a rage mode, but this is still the Blade of Olympus attacking, so we can't say this is unfair. Now, the best thing I go with for a whole loop is square triangle, basically what you see on screen. A cyclonic attack that hits surrounding enemies and deals neat damage. This allows me to be mobile and agile while also dealing the best damage. This is your DPS, your otherwise piss poor DPS, but we'll get to it in the next category. The Blade of Olympus in this game is very good, but it is held back by the fact that it's a rage mode. See, the rage mode is both a blessing and a curse for the Blade of Olympus. The blessing is simply the fact that it has a lot of hit properties that a normal secondary weapon might not have. It's just the fact that it's a rage mode that it has this unfair advantage over all the other Blades of Olympus in this, list. But it's also a curse since you're not really in this mode for a while. This was meant to be a mode where you damage enemies, and the damage is very bad and horrible. We get to it in the next category. You can still do some really nice things with the rage mode that you have, with the rage meter that you have that drains way too fast, but as a whole, this was meant to be a rage mode where you activate it, pop it, and go insane. And it doesn't do a good job at that. You should be very elegant and careful when using this weapon. So yeah, here's my advice. You just activate it, do something effective with it, and turn it off. I'm gonna be honest, it took me long to put my words into a script for the God of War 3 Blade of Olympus. It is a bit iffy to tackle in a video comparing Blade of Olympus. It is a rage mode first and a Blade of Olympus second. That's the problem with God of War 3 that is not so prevalent in God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. In there, it's the Blade of Olympus first, then a rage mode. In here is the rage mode first, then the blade. Most of its greatness comes from the fact that it's a rage mode. That's why it has all the insane hit properties that the other blades don't. But to talk about the blade alone, this thing is really good for crowd control and the moveset that goes along with it. let's move on and stop repeating myself. God of War Ghost of Sparta. This thing is broken. This is unfair since this feels like a hacked character that you play as. Yes, you can only play with this blade using Zeus. This thing destroys crowds with its lasers. Unlike God of War 2's laser, this one sticks to the enemy Nemesis rage style and it electrocutes surrounding ops, and you can attack them while all this is going on, and you can shoot it again and infinitely, and you can keep on attacking the enemy while it's going on. This is where this comparison starts getting interesting. You can only use this in the combat arena, not by Kratos, only by Zeus. The moveset is very simplistic. Ground light attacks, laser, air attacks on air laser. This thing, or mostly this guy that you're playing as, wrecks crowds. I can really just say nothing more than this. Shit is just S tier. You just pop one of those and go ham with melee attacks, add another one when you feel like it, and go ham again, and oh, what's that? Oh, you want to add another one? Oh, go ahead for it. It's infinite. It's not even a meter. I wish it was a cooldown or something. This thing is broken. But now we move on to God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. This one is also a rage mode, as I just said, but the hit properties are not crazy insane like God of War 3, since the rage mode can stay on for quite some time in here. The rage mode can stay on more than God of War 3 since it's two different approaches to the rage mode. Both in God of War 3 and God of War Ragnarok are just two different approaches to the rage mode with the Blade of Olympus. But this thing is still really good at crowd controlling, just not the best, I think. It is just really good. The light attacks are all wide and horizontal. The enemies can get wrecked if this is just used effectively. The parry also helps in a nice way, giving you iframes and you know, a room for a big slam that covers a nice area. This weapon cannot be that crazy insane for crowd controlling alone, but the parry really helps since it buys you a lot more time than needed, and invincibility frames as well, as I said. Other than that, this is more of a strategy weapon and not going into crowds and destroying a crowd weapon. You could do that if you're the best player of all time, but it's just, I don't know, this is more so meant for a 1v1 situation or a 1v2 situation. Granted, it has some attacks that cover a huge area, but that's all that I can say about it. And so now, we rank them in a top 4 crowd controlling Blade of Olympus list. Coming in at number 4, and this is a very sensitive list because the games are all close to each other in this aspect. At number 4, we have God of War Valhalla. It is sad to see this one so up on the list, but as I said, this is going to be a very sensitive top 4. This is the most sensitive and close to each other top 4. God of War Ragnarok Valhalla's crowd controlling Blade of Olympus slightly is lacking behind the number 3 spot. It is a very close list. Let's keep it just that way. We spoke of the number 3 spot. At number 3, we have God of War 2. God of War 2's crowd controlling is odd. Divine Retribution lasers can cover a huge part of that crowd controlling, owing to it having the ability to pierce through enemies, knock back half collisions, sweet damage, and so on. It's just that it's very risky and dangerous to go out only using this weapon alone for crowd control. It's just not meant to be the most convenient thing for crowd controlling. Next up at number 2, we have God of War 3. This thing being a rage mode is what puts it in the number 2 spot. It is a different rage mode than that of God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. In Valhalla, it's a strategy, careful, and elegant rage mode. In here, Kratos goes Super Saiyan. Every attack interrupts 80% of the roster. A lot of attacks have hit properties like launching, knockbacks, behaving, scattering, and all the kind. Hell, this thing attacks enemies when you're running towards them. It is simply a really nice crowd controlling tool, and I can't say any more than that. It takes the number 2 spot. At number 1, and I hate putting this shit at number 1, God of War Ghost of Sparta. I hate this being at number 1 since it feels like a cheat playing as Zeus. But I shouldn't really talk again on why this is a crowd fucker. This thing interrupts literally everyone and everything from what they're doing. This stuns fools and loops them in electricity while you skull fuck them with your light string. Nothing else I can really say. It just eats crowds and wipes them out. Takes the number 1 spot. I just want to move on. Now we move on to the last category. This one is the damage category, and it is a special one. Brace yourself for impact. We're about to dive deep into the damage of the blade that ended the Great War.
I offer you more than help, Kratos. I offer you power.
So let's start with the first game that introduced the blade. God of War 2. This thing is a beast when it comes to damage. As simple as that. At level 1, you might not find a lot of value in anything other than Divine Retribution lasers. That is, if you are looking for the safest and most damaging attack that pierces, knocks back enemies, and has the most range. Now here's the most neat thing about this attack in God of War 2. It is not influenced or affected by difficulty settings. Easy or very hard, this thing deals the same awesome damage. It does not get nerfed with difficulty. Now all of what I just spoke about is at level 1. At level 3, you have the whole blade turning into a beast of nature. The damage dealt is insane and otherworldly. Now that you have the blade at level 3, I'd say it's a good time to go with the square triangle loop that I shilled so much about in the last couple of categories. Since at max level, this weapon shoots lasers off of its basic attacks. Granted, the lasers are not as powerful as a special attack laser, but I mean, this thing just destroys. Very nice damage. Moving on. Next up we have God of War 3. The blade gets used the most in this game, killing gods and titans alike, destroying a pantheon with the power of hope stored in it and releasing hope to humanity when everyone thought it was impossible. The Blade of Olympus that has the weight of Olympus basket is in here in its full glory, dealing the shittiest damage out of all the blades.
Baba Booey.
God of War 3's blade doesn't deal that great of a damage. You'd think that a rage mode that takes away normal control and use of other weapons would actually provide some damage on the table. But no, this blade is good at everything but damage, which is quite odd. I mean, to be completely fair towards God of War 3, you have the cestus and the bow if you want to deal some insane fast damage. But that will be a video for another day. For now, the blade itself, in-game, sucks banana dick. This thing sucks offers of balls. Sad. It has a lot, or hell, everything to do with the fact that it's a rage mode. That's why it sucks in damage output. Like if this was just a normal secondary weapon, which you can have a walkthrough like that, just activate Zeus Eagle. This literally acts as another secondary weapon. But for what it is, purely it's a rage mode that deals shitty damage, as I said. I'll be diving deeper into that when we compare the rage modes. The Blade of Olympus in God of War 3 deals poor damage. That's all that I'm gonna say. Next up we have God of War Ghost of Sparta. The damage in this game is good. Nothing crazy insane like God of War 2, but it is definitely some nice damage, especially when keeping in mind that this thing has infinite projectiles that hit stuns fools and you can attack freely while it's going on. Nothing much I can truly say, that's all that I can say. The thing with Ghost of Sparta's blade is that it's only used by Zeus in the arena. Can't have all the fun you want to have in the campaign. But anyways, we move on to the latest installment of the Blade of Olympus, God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. This one can be a little neutral. If you're really good at using the blade and you are careful conserving your rage mode, you should be good at outputting a lot of damage even. The attacks of the blade can deal hella damage when you hold the inputs. High level enemies might make it seem a little weak, but hey, that's only for high-leveled folk. Holding the heavy attacks deals great damage on enemies, regardless of their level. Fuck the high-leveled enemies. I would have honestly liked Divine Retribution Laser dealing twice the damage that it does, but I guess it's a whole different approach here. But still, owing to how great the moveset is, you can output some pretty nice damage. The moves just work together and blend in together so well. The combat loop working so amazingly perfect with the rage mode itself makes it truly a wonderful weapon in all categories today. Did I mention this thing has a drop attack? The Blade of Olympus was truly redeemed as the titan and god-slaying weapon of destruction that it always was set out to be. When you watch a pro use the weapon, you get to see the full potential and damage output with this thing. Watch SMVR for a couple of minutes and you'll see him do otherworldly things you can't even imagine. You didn't even know the blade could do this. The Blade of Olympus in this game is good at outputting damage is what I'm trying to say. Let's get to the top 4 Blade of Olympus list based on damage. Coming in at number 4, we have God of War 3, and this is not a surprise. The damage is not all that great. Yes, we have the cestus if we want to deal damage, but again, I'm not gonna harp on this too much. This is a Blade of Olympus comparison, and the blade deals very poor damage in this entry. It can be useful in some small enemies, like the Legionnaires, or Dogs, or the Talos enemies, or to whip it out in a 1v1 to somewhat speed things up if you haven't unlocked the cestus yet. But that's all that I'm gonna give it. Let's move on. Coming up next at number 3, we have God of War Ghost of Sparta. The damage output with this one is neutral. It deals good damage, just not as good as God of War 2 or God of War Valhalla. Speaking of God of War Valhalla, it comes at number 2 in the list for damage output. Yes, it deals real nice damage. Yes, it can destroy fools, but not as crazy insane as the number 1 on the list. It is as simple as that. And please remember, this is not like a flaw or anything. This is all intentional. The blade in this game is strategic. The whole rage mode is about elegance and strategy. When the blade first came out for God of War Valhalla, a lot of people thought it was dog shit just because it didn't deal all that insane damage. It didn't clear a room with like one attack. but people didn't really experiment a lot at the time. Once you get the hang of it and understand it better, you surely can output nice damage and many more things, like Kratos' dick. But all that said, it simply doesn't hold up to the number 1 spot, God of War 2. Zeus was not kidding when he said, "I offer you power." This thing in God of War 2 is unfair. It is so broken once you max it out and get the hang of it that it changes the entire game so fast, and it outputs damage like a motherfucker. I mean, we have the Barbarian Hammer for extreme damage, but this thing competes with it purely because of how fast the attacking is, and you're outputting a lot of damage. I don't need to talk more about why this is the best at outputting damage. The Divine Retribution laser special attack alone clears the roster if used right. God of War 2's Blade of Olympus is simply the best blade at outputting damage, and that's where the list ends. Now, we just finished the top 4 Blade of Olympus damage-wise, right? Now we move on to the last top 4 of the video. Top 4 Blade of Olympus list in general. This will all be my personal picks, and you can leave yours in the comments down below. So coming in at number 4, we have God of War Ghost of Sparta. The blade in this game has a very limited moveset. It works well with the character you're playing as, but it's just not as fun as the others. There's just not a lot of attacks, and the fact that you can't use this guy in the main campaign just really brings the whole Blade of Olympus down for me by a lot. And it just does not hold a candle when compared to the other Blade of Olympus in this list. It just takes the number 4 spot. It is very honorable. It did a really nice job being the Blade of Olympus. Coming up next at number 3, we have God of War 3. The respect I have for the weapon is not all gone simply because the thing doesn't deal a lot of great damage. I really like all the attacks and the absolute amazing killer hit properties, but it is simply not as good as the other 2 on the list. It does come in handy for the hit properties it has, but that's it. Other than the cancels and the AoE activation thing, which, you know, this all has to do with the rage mode, to be honest, but all in all, it's really awesome, but not as awesome as the number 2 spot. At number 2, we have God of War 2. I don't need to go in depth again on what this weapon does in this game. It is simply a weapon of power, the successor of the Blade of Artemis, the true destroying tool once you're really good at the game and you're playing in New Game Plus, which sucks since you can't play with this in vanilla runs, but still, at least it's not locked in the arena like God of War Ghost of Sparta. The damage, the little attacks that it has that are effective, of course, the weight behind everything, it's very good. It takes the number 2 spot. I just talked in length about it for like the past 14 minutes. It takes the number 2 spot. Because at number 1, we have the best Blade of Olympus ever. At number 1 in the list, my favorite Blade of Olympus, God of War Valhalla. The synergy between the attacks and how they intertwine with each other, how they bounce off of each other, and simply the cohesive moveset that you have. The parrying, the guard break, the fast activation and deactivation. Did I mention this thing has a drop attack? As a complete package, this thing is just so awesome. This is also a rage mode like God of War 3, but unlike there where it was supposed to be a hyper mode designed to damage enemies, here it embraces its original nature from God of War 2 with the Divine Retribution playstyle. A strategy weapon that can look elegantly beautiful in many different ways than just going. The fact that it works well as a blade and as a rage mechanic just says it all about this thing. Parrying to get some of your rage back, hitting an enemy with the distance closing attack to retrieve the lost health back, held inputs, parry attacks, lasers, and all the other great stuff that this thing might have is just, I cannot ever preface how much I love this weapon. Did I mention this has a drop attack? The Blade of Olympus and God of War Ragnarok Valhalla is my favorite. I feel like I've shilled enough over it. This is the end of the top 4 list. But wait, hold on. Before you think this is my definitive top 4 Blade of Olympus list, I have a little something to say. It is regarding God of War 2 Blade of Olympus versus God of War 3 Blade of Olympus. And the fact of the matter is that you use the Blade of Olympus in God of War 3 a lot more than what you do in God of War 2. In God of War 2, you gotta play it through a hacked walkthrough, or basically, you know, New Game Plus, where you have all your equipment. That way you can have a run where you randomly have the Blade of Olympus. You don't really have this in a normal vanilla run where you can maybe use it at level 1, gradually upgrade it to level 2 and 3. That is not a problem in God of War 3 though. In God of War 3, you have it as a rage mode. You can use it a lot more than what you do in a vanilla run of God of War 2. So here's where the list gets a bit iffy. If we're talking like broadly, right? If we're talking all of God of War, like with the whole, you know, artifacts out of the way, New Game Plus out of the way, my definitive top 4 would be God of War Ghost of Sparta as the worst. Then God of War 2, not because the weapon itself is bad, but because the accessibility to the weapon is not as much as God of War 3's Blade of Olympus. You use it way more in God of War 3. At number 2 would be God of War 3. And finally, at number 1 would be God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. Valhalla is gonna have that throne for a while. I don't know how this is gonna get dethroned. This is my favorite rendition of the Blade of Olympus. But yeah, just wanted to have my piece on the God of War 2 versus God of War 3 argument that I knew I would have had if I just didn't discuss it like this. So, yeah. Thank you very much. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into the channel to watch my videos. It really means a lot to me. I'm glad my streams and videos are enjoyable to all, and I hope you all have a great day with hopefully new knowledge gained from this video. This took quite a long time to make, but I'm sure it's gonna be worth it because I'm sure you guys are gonna love it, and I'm gonna get the bag by getting a lot of views. Hey, listen, it's my job. It's my job. I deserve this, okay? The next main comparison will of course be the Rage comparison. Not anytime soon, but just know that the next big comparison will be that. I've done a Blades comparison, a Magic comparison, and now Blade of Olympus, the Titan Smoker, the blade that ended the Great War, the blade with Kratos' power stored into it, the blade that returned in Valhalla, the blade that screwed Valhalla over. Comparison. Thank you guys again so much, and this is the end of the video. It has been your Extreme Gamer Zesty. Peace.